There are moments in life when you realize you never truly knew the people living around you. You may wave politely at them in passing, nod at their yard work, greet them at the mailbox. You might even trust that the very people running your neighborhood's HOA hold some form of integrity. Yet sometimes, lurking behind manicured lawns and painted fences, the real nature of entitlement waits, quiet, patient, and ready to reveal itself when you least expect it. For me, that moment arrived on a warm Friday afternoon. I was returning from a short 3-day business trip, nothing dramatic, just one of those routine out-of-town projects that break the week in half. The neighborhood was peaceful when I pulled onto my street, the air calm, the sidewalks empty. Everything looked exactly how I left it. Or so I thought. Within the first few minutes of stepping inside my house, I felt that uneasy prickle across the back of my neck, a sensation that something was off. It wasn't messy, nothing was broken, but there was an unmistakable change in the air, as if the walls had absorbed movement, voices, presence, something foreign, something wrong. I brushed it off as paranoia from travel fatigue, but deep down, an instinct whispered otherwise. Before we continue, quick pause. If you love dramatic real-life HOA revenge stories and unbelievable Karen moments, remember to like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this journey to the end because what happens later will make your jaw drop. And tell me, what would you do if your neighbors used your home without permission? Back to the story. The first clue appeared when I walked into the living room and saw faint indentations on the carpet, chair legs pressed into places where chairs never stood. Next came the faint scent of cheap perfume lingering in the air, the kind favored by women who weaponize authority like a badge. And then, on my dining table, I noticed a water glass. Nothing unusual about a glass, except I hadn't left one there. A small, wet ring stained the wood beneath it. That glass wasn't mine. A shiver rolled through me. The thought hit hard, absurd yet impossible to ignore. Someone had been in my home. Still, I searched for logical explanations. Maybe I moved the chair and forgot. Maybe I set that glass down in a rush before leaving. Maybe my memory was playing tricks on me. So I tried to shake it off, but unease continued to coil tighter inside me. Then, as I walked past the wall where my security camera monitor usually sat, I noticed the tiny SD card missing. Gone, removed, taken. That was the moment doubt faded into certainty. Someone had entered, someone had tampered, someone had something to hide. My heart thudded as I sat and opened the camera system's cloud backup. Thankfully, I had enabled remote sync before I left. Frame by frame, footage revealed the careless arrogance of those who thought they were untouchable. Their arrival, their bodies entering, their casual behavior, their audacity. It was the HOA board, and not just any members, the president herself, Karen, along with her loyal inner circle. Walking into my house as though they owned it, as though I didn't exist. They didn't break in. No, they used the emergency contractor key kept at the HOA office, a key meant only for urgent repairs under strict permission. They walked through my home calmly, confidently, without hesitation. That wasn't burglary, it was something bolder, a violation disguised as authority. Then I saw the table set up, papers spread out, laptops open, refreshments unpacked. They weren't here to snoop. They held an HOA meeting in my house, without my consent, without notice, without shame. The most shocking part? Right on video, Karen reminded everyone to keep it secret. She even laughed, bragging that I'd be gone long enough, and too oblivious to ever know. But Karen made one crucial mistake. The meeting date she scheduled months ago? She rescheduled it publicly, except she forgot to change it on one internal calendar, which meant she expected me gone, but according to her own documents, I wasn't supposed to return until the next day. A single oversight, one mismanaged date, one arrogant assumption, And now I had proof. Shock turned into disbelief, disbelief into anger, and anger into a cold, focused determination. They violated my space, they trespassed, they used my property as their secret headquarters because they thought they could. The law was on my side, ethics were on my side, and now the truth was too. But I didn't rush toward confrontation. I didn't storm down the street. I didn't call the police, not yet. Because if they wanted to play quiet corruption behind closed doors, then I would open those doors to the world. This wasn't going to be a private matter. This was going to be public, thorough, and humiliating for them. I downloaded the footage, organized the timestamps, reviewed the HOA's bylaws. By midnight, I had everything laid out, every detail ready, evidence, documentation, and leverage, the perfect trap. Because when people abuse power, there are only two outcomes. They get away with it forever. Or the person they underestimate ends them. Quietly, methodically, and without mercy. And I was choosing the second. The next morning, as the sun rose, I felt something unfamiliar. Calm. The storm was gathering. The reckoning was coming. And soon the entire community would learn who they were really dealing with. The time had come to confront the board, but I wasn't going in enraged. I was going in prepared. I knew once I pressed play on that footage, the cracks in their power would spread like glass, shattering under pressure. This wasn't just personal anymore. This was war against entitlement, corruption, and false authority. And I was just getting started. There is a particular calm that comes before dismantling someone's illusion of control, a stillness that sits at the edge of triumph, built not from anger, but clarity. I woke the next morning with that feeling. The sun rose slow and indifferent, casting quiet gold across my living room, the same room that had been used without my permission only days before. The irony wasn't lost on me. They believed they could turn my home into their private power chamber. They believed their status made them untouchable. They believed I would never know. They were wrong. I spent the morning preparing, not frantically, but methodically, as though arranging chess pieces before a decisive play. Evidence files organized, timestamps aligned, HOA bylaws bookmarked, statutes printed, and a quiet satisfaction resting under every breath. I understood something they never did. Power isn't about titles, rules, or smug confidence. Real power is knowledge, timing, and patience. And I had all three. Before we go deeper, quick pause. If you're enjoying this unfolding revenge against HOA corruption, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and comment where you're watching from. I love seeing viewers from everywhere, Florida, Texas, California, even international viewers tuning in. And tell me, if your HOA secretly used your home, would you go nuclear or play it slow like I did? Let me know below. Your answer might end up in a future episode. Now, back to the takedown. By mid-morning, the neighborhood was quietly alive. Cars rolling out, sprinklers clicking across fresh lawns, joggers passing with headphones drowning out reality. Yet behind those peaceful scenes lingered something darker. Petty politics, secret alliances, and a familiar entitlement woven into the HOA's leadership. They lived assuming their authority was unquestioned, their decisions final, their behavior hidden. Today, that illusion would fracture. I walked into the HOA clubhouse with the calm confidence of someone who already knew the ending. The board sat assembled, sipping coffee and reviewing papers. Their expressions carried the same smugness I had seen so many times before. Power, expressed through posture, entitlement, disguised as leadership. But beneath their casual routine floated a subtle arrogance, a belief that no resident could truly challenge them. Little did they know, the ground beneath them had already begun to crumble. I sat, silent and steady, and watched as the meeting opened with routine formalities. budgets, maintenance schedules, petty fines against helpless homeowners for lawn height and mailbox paint. Arbitrary power exercised casually as though consequences never existed. They moved through their agenda with repetition, oblivious to what waited just moments ahead. Then, like a blade sliding across glass, the moment came. Evidence presented, footage revealed. Every second of their secret entry into my home played in undeniable clarity, their bodies crossing my threshold, their files spread across my table, their drinks resting on my furniture, their laughter, their arrogance, their voices instructing secrecy, their misuse of the emergency key, their blatant trespassing, their complete confidence that I would never know. Shock landed first, then denial, then panic. I watched it unfold not with pleasure, but with a measured calm, reserved for people finally facing the mirror they avoided their whole lives. Their power wasn't real, it was borrowed from silence, and silence had just been shattered. One attempted excuse crumbled under proof. One fabricated justification disintegrated under documented policy. One claim of authority evaporated under state law. They had crossed a line no HOA bylaw could protect them from. They trespassed into a private residence. They tampered with personal property. They misused community keys. They abused authority for secrecy. For a board obsessed with control, losing it was like drowning in slow motion. I requested an immediate record of the meeting minutes be logged, truthfully, their violation, my evidence, their misuse of emergency authority, their unauthorized entry, their breach of trust. Every detail required to be documented in the official record, public record. It was a permanent stain they could never wash away. They tried to negotiate dignity, not with words, no dialogues here, but through posture, silence, avoidance. They hoped this could remain contained, limited, forgotten. But that wasn't going to happen. Their confidence had built walls. I had just kicked in the door. Once the evidence was locked into the minutes, the board's unity cracked. The president's control weakened. Silence replaced certainty. Panic replaced arrogance. They adjourned early, shaken, exposed, and without the power they arrived with. I walked out calmly, not triumphant, but certain. Their downfall wasn't instant, it was just beginning. HOA power isn't lost in a single moment. It erodes through humiliation, distrust, and internal fracture. And I had set that erosion in motion. When I returned home, the house felt different. Not violated now, claimed. Not invaded, but reclaimed. The walls felt mine again. The air felt settled. Yet my mission wasn't complete. Exposing them in a meeting was only the first stage. The true reckoning required sunlight, transparency, and community awareness. So I prepared the next step. I gathered digital files. I organized the documented minutes. I requested the recorded meeting disclosure required by community rules. Once published, those minutes would be accessible to every resident. Every neighbor who ever felt bullied, silenced, fined unfairly, disrespected, intimidated, or humiliated by the board would see the truth, not imagined corruption, documented abuse of power in undeniable proof. And it would spread. Rumors happen quickly in communities like this, but facts move faster and they cut deeper, especially when delivered with precision. I didn't need to speak loudly. I didn't need confrontation in the street. I didn't need shouting matches or emotional scenes. Quiet truth was far sharper. They had used my home as a stage for control. Now my evidence would turn the neighborhood into an audience. As afternoon faded into evening, subtle whispers already began. Curious glances, suspicion, concern rippling across quiet sidewalks. Something had happened, something big, something the board didn't control. For the first time, the balance of power shifted, not to me, but back to the community where it always belonged. The president of the HOA, Karen herself, retreated from visibility. The board scrambled privately, attempting damage control. But secrecy had betrayed them once, now it worked against them. Residents sensed change, and change, once scented, grows faster than fear can contain. That night, alone in the peaceful silence of my home, I felt no need for celebration. Justice isn't satisfaction, it's alignment, and for the first time, things were aligning. The truth had surfaced, accountability had begun, and humiliation, the currency of the entitled, was now theirs to carry. But a final reckoning remained. Evidence alone doesn't deliver justice. Community recognition does. Public accountability does. Exposure does. And the final stage was about to begin, when the meeting minutes became public record. Because some people only learn through embarrassment. And these board members were about to experience the most public embarrassment of their lives. The next chapter wasn't going to be about confrontation, it was going to be about consequence. Power lost, reputation shattered, community eyes watching. The story was far from over. There are two kinds of downfalls in this world, the ones that crash loudly, shaking everything in their path, and the ones that crumble quietly, collapsing grain by grain, until the people who once stood tall find themselves buried beneath their own arrogance. The HOA board didn't fall all at once. The unraveling began slowly, silently, and then, when everyone was watching, it swallowed them whole. The morning the official minutes were released, the neighborhood sat in an eerie stillness. There was no announcement, no warning, no smug newsletter explaining new regulations or fines. Just a quiet email attachment, arriving like any other routine update. Except this one wasn't routine. It was the truth, sealed and time-stamped, impossible to deny. A written record documenting the board's decision to hold a private meeting inside my home, their misuse of the emergency key, their violation of policy, and the evidence that forced their admission. Most residents skim through HOA paperwork. Rules, fees, landscaping updates, mundane words blended into background noise. But this time, the subject line carried gravity. Emergency use key policy violation and unauthorized residence entry, board minutes. And suddenly, everyone paid attention. It didn't take long for the ripple to begin. First, whispers. A neighbor leaning over a hedge, eyes wide, murmuring disbelief. A jogger pausing mid-stride to scroll through the email again, realizing the scandal wasn't rumor, it was documented fact. A garden club member forwarding the file to a group chat within the first 5 minutes. Screens lit up, phones buzzed, brows furrowed. And slowly, the quiet respect once commanded by the board twisted into irritation, disgust, betrayal. Pause here for a moment. If you're still watching, make sure to subscribe, drop a like, and tell me which country or state you're watching from. Comment below. Should an HOA board member lose their position instantly for abusing access like this? Would you ever trust them again? Let's see what you would do in this situation. Back to the downfall. HOA power thrives on silence and fear. But when residents learn the truth, silence breaks, replaced by voices once too hesitant to speak. Soon, driveways became little islands of conversation. People stood in small groups, shaking their heads, retelling the details, growing bolder with each recount. For years, homeowners whispered about unfair fines, unexplained fees, ignored concerns, favoritism, and petty board decisions. But until now, those murmurs had always faded, dismissed as complaints without teeth. Now there was evidence, proof, a breach so blatant no one could minimize it. Karen, the HOA president who once strutted through the neighborhood like a self-appointed monarch, vanished from public sight. The front lawn that she once monitored obsessively now sat uncared for, as if even the grass refused to perform under her reign. The white porch swing remained still. Curtains stayed drawn. Silence replaced her presence. The boards scrambled quietly, holding private calls, sending hurried messages among themselves, hoping to regain control. But the neighborhood's confidence had already escaped their grasp. Trust, once broken, doesn't return simply because those in power demand it. They tried to frame the incident as a logistical misunderstanding, a technical miscommunication, even an emergency administrative necessity. But the facts stood stubbornly against them, cold and unwavering. They hadn't entered for emergency repairs. They hadn't been responding to danger or safety concerns. They used someone's home as a secret boardroom. They believed the rules didn't apply to them. Their weapon of control, authority, had turned to dust in their hands. Meanwhile, residents began digging through past board minutes with renewed suspicion. If they abused power once, how many times before? Every minor violation suddenly felt like part of a bigger pattern. Every fine questioned, every denied request reconsidered. People who once grumbled quietly now demanded answers. The board inbox flooded. Requests for audits surfaced. Calls for transparency grew louder. And slowly, resignation letters began to appear. Not heroically, not responsibly, but quietly, like people slipping out the back door of a burning building, hoping no one would see them leave. The treasurer stepped down first, citing personal health. The secretary followed, claiming time conflicts. Another member resigned due to life priorities. But everyone knew the truth. They weren't leaving from obligation. They were escaping humiliation. But Karen didn't step down. Not yet. Her pride wouldn't allow it. This wasn't about service or community. It was about control. And control is the last thing a person like her releases willingly. She remained entrenched, clinging to power like a sinking captain, convinced she could command the ocean around her. What she didn't realize was that the title she held no longer held authority. She wasn't a leader anymore. She was a symbol of entitlement, of overreach, of failure, and symbols burn brightly in the public eye. When the next community meeting arrived, the room filled with more residents than ever before. People who hadn't attended a single meeting in years showed up, sitting in every available chair, standing along walls, arms crossed, expressions unwavering. Not angry loudness, but calm, collected resolve, the kind that unnerves the powerful more than shouting ever could. Karen arrived with posture stiff, chin lifted high, wearing the false confidence of someone who believes that if they act unbothered enough, the world will realign to their preference. But as she took her seat, something changed. Something subtle, but undeniable. She wasn't at the head of the room anymore. She was being observed, evaluated, judged. When the meeting opened, residents didn't erupt in chaos. They didn't yell or demand theatrics. They asked simple questions, firm questions, direct, unflinching questions. Why did the board enter a private residence? Why was secrecy necessary? Why misuse emergency keys? Why wasn't the homeowner notified? Why should anyone trust leadership again? Each answer offered, carefully worded, shallow, wrapped in self-preservation, fell flat. Because truth has weight, and excuses have none. At the end of the meeting, emotion rose, not angry, not emotional, but resolute. A vote to remove the president. And when hands lifted, they lifted not with rage, but with certainty. One by one, palms raised, some slow and deliberate, some swift and eager. In the end, not a single hand rose to support her staying. Not one. Power slipped from her not by force, but by absence. Authority drained away, leaving only the reality she refused to see. Control isn't real unless others agree to be controlled. She stood, stunned, rigid, unable to process the shift she never believed possible. And in that quiet room, stripped of title and influence, she walked out, not as a leader, but as a reminder. A reminder to everyone watching that power built on arrogance never lasts. Afterward, the neighborhood changed, slowly, quietly, but undeniably. Meetings became transparent, rules became fairer, respect replaced fear. Neighbors who once hid behind curtains now waved freely. The community felt lighter, as though a long shadow had finally lifted. And my home? It returned to being what it always should have been, mine. Not a stage for someone else's authority, not a backdrop for secret decisions, but a sanctuary. The place where truth began and entitlement ended. I didn't win through aggression or chaos. I won through patience, documentation, and exposure. Because sometimes justice isn't loud, it's methodical. Sometimes revenge isn't dramatic, it's precise. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply let people reveal who they are and make sure everyone sees it. This is what happens when power forgets accountability, when entitlement forgets humility, when authority forgets consent. They used my home for a board meeting. They thought no one would ever know. They forgot to change the date. And that was all it took.